The clock on the nightstand says 3:17 a.m. I know because I've been staring at it for 43 minutes. The room is so quiet I can hear my own heartbeat, and not in a poetic way, in a way that makes me check my pulse just to make sure it's still doing what it's supposed to do. There's a stack of bills on the kitchen counter I didn't open today. Didn't open yesterday either, if I'm being honest. Rent's due in 11 days. The car insurance auto-drafted last week and overdrafted my checking account by $34. My bank sent me a text about it at 2:14 p.m. while I was in the middle of a job interview that I already knew I wasn't going to get. The rejection email came at 6:42 p.m. We appreciate your interest, however we've decided to move forward with other candidates whose qualifications more closely align. I've read that exact sentence 7 times. Maybe 8. It lives in my phone now, buried in a folder I've labeled later, which is really just a graveyard for things I can't bring myself to delete but also can't bear to look at. Tick. 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 The clock on the wall, the one my daughter picked out at a thrift store because she said the numbers were happy colors, keeps moving. Every tick sounds like a countdown. To what? I don't know. The next bill. The next overdraft. The next email telling me I'm not enough. I swing my legs over the side of the bed. The floor is cold. February cold. The kind that seeps through socks and makes you wonder if the heating bill was worth it this month. I don't turn on the lights. I just sit there in the dark, listening to my wife breathe softly beside me, oblivious to the spreadsheet running through my head, the one where I've calculated exactly how many months we have left before the savings runs dry. The answer is not comforting. 3 hours earlier. I was sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store I didn't need to be at. The car was off. The windows were fogging up from the cold and from my own breath. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white, jaw tight, shoulders up around my ears like I was bracing for impact. I had just come from that interview. The one I prepped 3 days for. The one I prayed over. The one where I wore my best shirt and practiced my answers in the mirror and asked 3 friends to pray for me and even fasted lunch because somewhere along the way I picked up this idea that maybe if I wanted it badly enough, if I showed God how serious I was, He'd finally open the door. The interview lasted 17 minutes. I knew what that meant. Everyone knows what that means. When they don't ask follow-up questions. When they glance at the clock. When they say, "We'll be in touch," but their voice drops at the end like they're already closing the file. So I sat in that parking lot. Engine off. Heat off. Just me and the foggy windows and the POV of a man who's been holding it together all day and now has nowhere left to be strong. You know that moment. The one where you're supposed to walk through the front door and be the husband, the father, the provider, the one who has it under control, but you can't. Not yet. You need 5 more minutes. So you sit in your car in a random parking lot and you breathe and you tell yourself you're fine and you almost believe it until your phone buzzes with another bill notification and the fragile little piece you constructed shatters all over again. I gripped that steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away. God, do you see this? The question didn't come out loud. It never does. It came from somewhere deeper, the place where faith and fear have been wrestling for months and neither one is winning. God, do you see me sitting in this parking lot? Do you see these bills? Do you see the job I didn't get, the ones I won't get, the savings that's evaporating like steam off this windshield? Because right now it feels like you don't. That's the tension no one tells you about when you become a Christian. They tell you God is faithful. They tell you He provides. They tell you to trust, to pray, to have faith, to declare breakthrough, to speak favor over your finances, to rebuke the spirit of lack, to claim the promises. And you do. You do all of it. You pray in the morning and you pray at night and you pray in between when the anxiety spikes. You tithe when you can. You give when it doesn't make sense. You speak scriptures over your bank account like a warrior going into battle. And then the rejection email comes anyway. And the overdraft fee hits anyway. And you're sitting in a parking lot at 6:30 p.m. gripping a steering wheel and wondering if God even heard a single word you said. I remember a night last month. I couldn't sleep, surprise, so I went to the living room and sat on the couch in the dark. I opened my Bible app. I scrolled through old prayers I typed out. Some of them were from 2 years ago. Same requests. Same desperation. Same God, please provide. 2 years. What do you do with that? What do you do when you've been praying the same prayer for 2 years and the answer is still silence? Not a no, just nothing. Just the tick of the clock and the stack of bills and the quiet, gnawing fear that maybe this is just how it's going to be. I started asking harder questions that night. If you love me, why am I still struggling? If you see me, why is nothing changing? If you're my Father, why does it feel like I'm on my own? I didn't get an answer. Not right away. The room stayed dark. The clock kept ticking. My phone stayed silent. And I went back to bed with the same heaviness I'd woken up with. That's the part of faith nobody posts about on social media. The waiting that feels like abandonment. The silence that feels like rejection. The provision that doesn't come on time, at least not on our time. But here's what I'm learning. Slowly. Painfully. In the middle of the night and in empty parking lots and on cold February floors. Here's the thing about sitting in a dark living room at 3 in the morning, scrolling through 2-year-old prayers that still haven't been answered. Eventually, you stop asking God, when, and you start asking a much harder question, God, what am I supposed to learn here that I can't learn any other way? That question didn't come with a lightning bolt. You know that move, right? I was mid-shuffle when my phone buzzed. Because what was I going to say? We can't afford garlic bread right now, Karen. The overdraft fees just hit and I'm pretty sure our bank account is being held together by prayer and duct tape. The shame sat in my stomach like a stone. Not just the shame of not having enough, the shame of not being able to admit it. The shame of smiling at church and saying God is good while mentally calculating whether we had enough gas to make it to payday. The shame of watching my daughter come home from school talking about her friend's trip to Disney World, asking with those big innocent eyes, Daddy, how come we never go on vacation? Mirror moment, right there. If you've ever stood in your kitchen, or your hallway, or your empty parking lot, and felt the weight of not being able to give your family what you want to give them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know the loneliness of carrying a burden you don't feel allowed to share. You know the exhaustion of pretending everything is fine when the math isn't mattering and the faith is getting thin. But here's where the plot twists. The pages fell open to Philippians, and I landed on a verse I'd read dozens of times but never really saw. Philippians 4 verse 19, But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. I almost closed the book right there. Honestly. Because when you're staring at a stack of bills and an empty fridge and a calendar full of rejection emails, a verse about God supplying all your needs can feel like a cruel joke. It can feel like the spiritual version of thoughts and prayers, nice words that don't pay the electric bill. But something made me stop. Something made me read it again, slower. According to his riches in glory. Not according to your bank balance. Not according to the job market. Not according to the economy or the interest rates or the hiring manager who never called you back. According to his riches. In glory. That's a completely different economy. And that's when it hit me, the provision of God is so much bigger than money suddenly appearing in your mailbox. I had been praying for a financial miracle. A check. A breakthrough. A lottery ticket, if I'm being completely honest. I had been praying for a financial miracle. A check. A breakthrough. A lottery ticket, if I'm being completely honest. And when it didn't come, I hit a wall. I remember one night sitting on the kitchen floor, phone in hand, staring at a bank balance that felt like a verdict. I put the phone down, pressed my palms into my eyes, and just wept, not the quiet, composed kind, but the ugly, gasping cry of someone who has run out of plans. But God, in His frustrating, beautiful, infinitely wise way, was trying to give me something else first. Not the quiet, composed kind, but the ugly, gasping cry of someone who has run out of plans. But God, in His frustrating, beautiful, infinitely wise way, was trying to give me something else first. I remember standing in the grocery aisle 3 months later, holding 2 jars of pasta sauce, one name brand, one store brand, and realizing I had been choosing the expensive one for years without even tasting the other. That $1.47 difference wasn't going to rescue me, but the mindset behind it was. I had been hemorrhaging small choices, mistaking habit for preference, mistaking comfort for necessity. A few weeks before that, I almost signed a lease on an apartment that stretched my budget thin, telling myself it was an investment in my sanity, more space, more light, more peace. The landlord called back to say someone else got it, and I wept like I'd been personally rejected by God. Only later, sitting in the cramped living room I kept, with a budget that could actually breathe, did I recognize the protection I had cursed as cruelty. The wisdom wasn't thunder and lightning. It was a quiet unlearning. It was my own hand hovering over the cart, choosing differently. Ng stingy. He was being a good father, teaching your hands to hold things loosely so your heart could learn to cling to Him alone. T. That opportunity that fell through? What if God, in His mercy, was keeping you from a path that would have led to even greater burden, even deeper burnout, even more time away from the people you love? Memorable truth: sometimes God doesn't add to your hands, He adds to your heart the wisdom you need before He adds to your account the abundance you want. I learned this in the long season when my bank balance seemed frozen and my prayers for provision felt unanswered. A few years ago, after a promising job offer evaporated overnight, I sat at that kitchen table with cold coffee and a stack of bills, wondering why God had closed a door I was so sure He'd opened. The disappointment was thick, but slowly, through the quiet ache, I began to sense His gentle reordering of my soul. He wasn't withholding a paycheck as punishment, He was protecting me from a role that would have demanded 70-hour weeks and stolen precious evenings from my young children. The wisdom He planted in my heart during those months reshaped my definition of abundance. I stopped measuring it in dollars and started recognizing it in dinner table laughter, unhurried bedtime stories, and the peace of being present. He didn't fill my hands first, He filled my heart with the clarity to receive what truly matters. Here's the tension I'm still learning to navigate. Fear screams at you with urgent, worst-case scenarios. It replays the missed opportunity and whispers that scarcity is your permanent address. But wisdom speaks in a quieter, steadier tone. It invites you to look back at the closed door and ask, what if that wasn't rejection but redirection? What if the Father, in His mercy, was keeping you from a path that would have led to even greater burden, even deeper burnout, even more time away from the people you love? That kitchen table moment became a sacred altar where I stopped clutching my plans and started trusting His timing. The cold coffee and unpaid bills didn't vanish, but the Spirit began warming something deeper within me, a quiet confidence that His provision often arrives disguised as delay, and His greatest gift isn't always what He places in our hands, but what He first carves into our hearts. You to do something right now. Fear tells you to send the desperate email, to take the shady opportunity, to borrow from the wrong source, to make a move, any move, because standing still feels like dying. But faith whispers something different. Faith says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. That's Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. I had memorized those verses as a kid in Sunday school. I could recite them without thinking. But I had never lived them, not really. Not when the pressure was on. Not when every natural instinct in my body was screaming at me to panic, to scheme, to manipulate, to do whatever it took to fix the problem myself. Standing at the crossroads of your finances when you don't know which way to go, when every door you knock on stays shut, when the math doesn't add up and the timeline doesn't make sense and the silence from heaven is deafening, that's not a sign that God has abandoned you. That's the classroom. That's where you learn to trust. I remember standing in my living room that evening, looking out the window at the streetlights coming on, and having this moment of raw, unfiltered honesty with God. I didn't pray pretty. I didn't use church words. I just said, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't know why this door closed. I don't know why that opportunity evaporated. I don't know how we're going to make it through next month. But I'm choosing to trust you anyway. Not because I feel it. Because I'm choosing it. And that's when I realized that's the whole point. That's the lesson. That's what God was trying to teach me in the parking lots and the sleepless nights and the cold coffee and the grilled cheese dinners. He wasn't punishing me. He wasn't ignoring me. He was inviting me into a deeper kind of trust, the kind that doesn't need to see the whole staircase before taking the next step. And here's the part that still makes my heart pound when I think about it. God never asked me to have all the answers. I remember the exact moment everything broke open. It was 5:42 in the morning on a Tuesday, and I hadn't slept in 3 days. Not really. The rent was due in 6 days. The electricity bill had a red stamp on it that I'd been hiding under a stack of junk mail. My daughter needed a medication refill that insurance wasn't going to cover, and I had already sold the guitar, the vintage camera, and the ring my grandmother left me. There was nothing left to sell. There was nothing left to cut. There was nothing left in me. I got out of bed at 5:42 a.m. not because I wanted to pray but because I had nowhere else to go. I knelt. And I don't mean I folded my hands neatly and bowed my head. I mean my knees hit that hardwood floor with the weight of a man who had been fighting God for months and finally ran out of strength to keep his fists up. I opened my Bible to Psalm 23, not because I'm spiritual, but because it was the only page my hands remembered how to find in the dark. And right there, with tears dripping onto the thin pages and smearing the ink, I read the words I had read 1,000 times before but never actually believed. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I stopped at that verse. I couldn't get past it. Because for the first time in my life, I realized I had been treating God like an emergency backup plan when my paycheck failed, and not like a shepherd who was supposed to lead me through green pastures and dark valleys in Tuesday mornings at 5:42 when the math doesn't work. Mirror moment, I sat there on that cold floor, and something shifted, not in my circumstances, but in my soul. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 6 months. Like setting down a backpack full of bricks I'd forgotten I was carrying. My shoulders dropped. My jaw unclenched. I took a breath so deep it hurt, and then I took another one, and for the first time and longer than I could remember, I felt something that had no logical explanation given the stack of bills still sitting on the kitchen counter. Peace. Not the peace of solved problems. Not the peace of a bank account with extra zeros. The peace that passes understanding. The peace that shows up when you finally stop trying to be God and let God be God. And then I prayed. Not a pretty prayer. Not a church prayer with the right words in the right order. I prayed like a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to surrender. Father, I don't know how we're going to pay the rent. It's due in 6 days and the number is $1,475 and I have $218 in my checking account. I don't know how the electricity is going to stay on. I don't know how I'm going to get my daughter's medication. I don't know how we're going to cover the school fees or the car payment or the groceries for next week. I have tried everything I know to try. I have knocked on every door. I have sent the emails and made the calls and applied for the jobs and nothing has opened up. So I'm bringing it to you. Not because I'm holy. Not because I'm faithful. Because I'm desperate. And because you said you were my shepherd, and shepherds don't abandon their sheep when the wolves show up. They don't run when the storm hits. They stay. They protect. They provide. Give me wisdom, Lord. I don't just need money, I need wisdom to manage what you've already given me. I need discernment to know which opportunities are from you and which ones are traps dressed up as solutions. I need clarity to see the difference between a closed door that's protection and an open door that's provision. I need patience to wait on your timing instead of panicking and making decisions I'll regret. Protect me from desperate choices. Protect me from shady deals and quick fixes and borrowing from the wrong sources. Protect my marriage from the strain of this pressure. Protect my children from feeling the weight they were never meant to carry. Protect my mind from the lies that tell me I'm a failure, that I've ruined everything, that you've given up on me. I pray for my wife. You see the lines on her face that weren't there a year ago. You see her lying awake at night pretending to sleep so I won't worry. Give her peace that doesn't depend on the balance in our account. Give her hope that isn't tied to a paycheck. I pray for my daughter. She needs that medication, Father. She needs to know that you see her and love her and haven't forgotten her. I pray for my son. He's watching me, Lord. He's learning what faith looks like when it's tested. Don't let my fear become his inheritance. And I pray for every person listening to my voice right now who's kneeling on their own cold floor in their own dark room with their own stack of bills and their own exhausted heart. Meet them where they are. Speak peace into their chaos. Open doors no man can shut. Send provision from unexpected places. Remind them that they are not forgotten, not abandoned, not alone. I stayed on that floor until the sun came up. Not because I was waiting for an answer. Because I had finally stopped demanding one. Something had shifted in that room, not in my bank account, not in my circumstances, not in the bills on the counter, but in me. I had spent months trying to be my own provider, my own protector, my own savior. And in one tear-soaked, broken, desperate morning, I finally let God have his job back. Memorable truth, here's what I learned on that cold floor at sunrise, and it's a truth I will carry with me until the day I die. He is my shepherd, not my salary, not my boss, not the economy, not my 401k, not my emergency fund, not my side hustle. He is my shepherd. And when the shepherd is leading, his sheep don't lack what they truly need. I can't tell you that the rent money appeared in my mailbox that afternoon. I can't tell you that a mysterious check arrived in the mail or that I won the lottery or that all my problems vanished by sundown. That's not how this story went. What I can tell you is that I got up off that floor a different man than the one who knelt down.